The town of Dorvan Hollow did not exist on any modern map, and most GPS signals died 15 miles out, as the air itself refused to carry digital echoes into its soil. Roads curved like nerves around endless forests, all of them leading eventually to the Crooked Pines, an ancient woodland that loomed like a fevered dream over the valley. The trees bent at unnatural angles, some arching like backs mid-convulsion. Others twisted as though writhing against an unseen force. Locals said they grew that way after fire, but there were no records of fire. Julian Rourke didn't care about that. He didn't believe in the myths or the warnings passed down through clenched teeth in Dorvan Hollow's only bar. He only cared that he'd inherited the last surviving property at the edge of the pines, his grandfather's forgotten cabin. And he needed somewhere quiet to unravel. He arrived just past dusk, headlights sweeping through mist that clung low to the gravel driveway. The cabin squatted at the tree lean, its black with planks wet with dew or something colder. The windows were opaque with age. Something about the place felt peeled back, like it wasn't made to keep things out, but to keep something in. Julian stepped out of the car, duffel bag over his shoulder. He stood in the heavy silence, no wind, no crickets, just the dense breath of the forest. He could feel the pressure of it, not a breeze, but sensation, like being watched through glass. He unlocked the door. It took 3 turns of the rusted key and a shoulder shove to break the seal. Inside, the air was thick and pungent. Mildew would rot old paper. The layout was simple. Kitchen to the left, a collapsed armchair beside a crumbling stone fireplace, and a narrow staircase at the back leading to the attic bedroom. Dust clung to everything like a memory. He dropped his bag and exhaled for the first time in hours. The silence of the place was total. He found the circuit breaker behind the kitchen door and flipped it. The lights flickered once, then buzzed on in a dim amber glow. One bulb in the living room sputtered but held. A few lamps worked upstairs. No TV, no phone. Just an old radio in the corner with the dial cracked down the center. Julian sat on the floor, back against the wall, eyes scanning the knots in the wooden ceiling. He didn't want to sleep yet. The drive from Portland had been endless. But the thought of lying in that brittle attic bedroom unsettled him more than the exhaustion. It was then, in the low hum of half-functioning electricity, that he heard it. 3 knocks. Soft, deliberate, from inside the walls. He froze. The sound didn't come again. He convinced himself it was a house settling. That's what old houses did. They creaked and cracked like knees. He opened his bag, pulled out a flask, and drank. Whiskey burned its way through his ribs. He poured another and stared at the floorboards, avoiding the windows. Just as his eyelids began to drift, the radio switched on. Static hissed from its cracked speaker. Julian flinched. The dial began to turn, slow, creaking, and the station shifted from white noise to something else. A faint melody. A woman's voice, sweet and lilting, singing a lullaby in a language he didn't recognize. Mira, Mira, Kal-El Sol. He crawled toward it and slammed his palm over the power knob. The radio clicked off. Silence again. But this time, the air had changed. He could smell something. Pine needles and charred meat. Julian stood, behind him. From somewhere upstairs, the floor creaked under a second set of steps. Someone, or something, was walking in the attic bedroom. He turned and stared at the staircase. The shadows at the top of it seemed darker than they should be. Heavy, listening. The radio clicked back on. The lullaby returned. He didn't move. Then, from just above him, a voice whispered low and clear, a woman's voice. Not singing this time, but speaking. You shouldn't have come back, Julian. Julian stumbled back, knocking his shoulder against the wall. The whisper hadn't drifted down from the attic. It had slipped beside him, like a breath at the edge of his ear. He turned, half expecting to see someone standing in the room with him. But there was no one, only the thick, clotted shadows of the cabin, and the voice still echoing behind his ribs. He grabbed a flashlight from his bag and flicked it on, its narrow beam cutting through the gloom. The staircase loomed ahead, old with groaning beneath its own weight. The singing from the radio had stopped again, replaced now by a sound so soft it felt imagined. Breathing. He edged forward. One step, then another, Halfway up, his foot hit something soft and he froze. The flashlight's beam tilted down, caught on a bundle of dried flowers tied with black thread. He bent to pick them up. The petals flaked off in his hand like ash. What the hell? The scent was familiar. Lavender, yes, but beneath it, something sickly sweet, like spoiled fruit or wet fur. He pushed open the attic door. The room was small, just a bed, an old writing desk under the gable window, and a wardrobe with its door slightly ajar. Dust motes hung in the beam of his flashlight, swirling like insects. The air was colder here, not just from altitude, but from something else, something recent. The bed was made. He hadn't made it. No footprints in the thick layer of dust on the floor. But there, on the pillow, lay a strand of long black hair. Julian backed out, fast, nearly tripped over his own feet, getting down the stairs. He slammed the attic door shut behind him and didn't stop until he was outside, standing in the damp gravel of the driveway, breathing like he'd run a mile. The air out here was different too, but not better. The trees had grown closer. He swore they had. The crooked pines at the edge of the yard leaned in, just slightly, but it was enough to notice, enough to suggest motion where there should be stillness. Julian lit a cigarette with shaking fingers and turned in a slow circle. Moonlight barely pierced a cloud cover, but he could make out the shape of the woods, the impossible way the trees bent, like arms reaching back toward the cabin. He stared at the dark wall of forest, and the forest stared back. There was something moving between the trees. He couldn't see it exactly, just a hint of limbs too long in shadows that twisted against the natural order of light. But he knew it was watching. He flicked the cigarette and returned inside, slamming the door behind him. This time he locked it, barred it with a chair, sat down at the table, and did what his grandfather would have done. Poured another drink and muttered curses at the walls. "This place is fucked," he said aloud, if only to hear something human. The radio clicked on again. This time, no singing, just that same static hiss. Then a voice, clearer than before. "Male, gravel thick. You left her here, Julian." Julian stood frozen, glass in hand. The voice continued. "You buried her beneath the crooked one. Thought she'd stay dead. But you were just a boy then, and boys forget things." Julian's mouth went dry. The edges of his vision narrowed to pinpricks. "No," he whispered. "That never happened." The voice laughed, low, cracked, full of wet rot. "Come to the tree, Julian. She's waiting." Then the radio died, this time for good. He stayed at the table until the light outside began to shift, a dark blue that heralded dawn. But no sun came to the windows, only a deeper shade of shadow. He dozed off eventually, cheek against the wood, dreams thick with fire and bone, and a girl's face without eyes. When he woke, the front door was wide open, and at the center of the threshold, pressed gently into the dirt, was a child's handprint. It was small, no larger than a 5-year-old's, and impossibly crisp, as if pressed moments ago into soil that should have been too dry for such definition. 5 fingers, a delicate palm. The imprint curved ever so slightly, pointing toward the tree line, toward the crooked one. He stepped outside barefoot and knelt beside it. There were no other tracks, no adult footprints, no drag marks, no animal trails. Just a handprint, alone, as if a child had risen from the earth itself to reach out. His stomach clenched. He knew the stories, knew the name, Rhea. He hadn't said it in years. Not since he was 12, when the summer air in Dwarven Hollow turned so thick with heat that children swam in it like soup. Rhea had lived just down the road, dark-haired, quiet, obsessed with things that crawled and wilted. She was his first friend, his only real one, and she had vanished. Everyone believed she ran away, or was taken by one of the drifters that passed through. But Julian remembered the screams, the woods, the pit under the bent pine. He remembered digging. "No," he whispered again, standing too fast, heart banging behind his ribs. "No, no, no." But the trees beckoned. He turned and looked toward the crooked one. It stood taller than the others, its trunk bent at a grotesque 45-degree angle, branches like broken fingers reaching across the clearing. The air around it shimmered, a heatless mirage, the way asphalt does in dead heat. Julian didn't remember walking, but suddenly he was standing in front of it. The ground beneath the tree was soft, disturbed. He crouched, ran his fingers over the loam. It pulsed beneath his touch. Julian yanked his hand back, breath caught. From the corner of his eye, he saw her, a girl, standing just at the forest edge, pale, barefoot, wearing a dress too old for time. Her hair hung like black silk over her shoulders, and her eyes, those empty sockets, held no reflection, just a depthless void that threatened to pull everything into her. "Rhea," he called, barely above a whisper. She didn't move. He took a step toward her, compelled. Every part of him screamed to run, but his legs moved forward like sleepwalking. The closer he got, the more details emerged. Mud clung to her hem. Her hands were clean, too clean, as if they had never touched earth, never clawed out of it. "I didn't leave you," he said. "You were gone. I thought you were gone." Rhea tilted her head. A deep creak echoed from the crooked pine behind him, with bending, groaning. He turned. The tree was opening, not splitting or cracking, opening. The bark parted like a wound, revealing a hollow cavity that breathed fog into morning light. The scent that rolled out was rancid, earth and rot and something older, something buried. Julian staggered back, but the girl was behind him now, closer. She lifted her hand, palm out. It was clean, identical to the print on the doorstep. And then, with a voice not her own, not human, she whispered, "One of us must stay." Julian ran. He didn't remember the sprint back to the cabin, only the pounding of his feet and the roaring in his ears. The front door was still open, wide like a mouth, and he bolted inside, slamming it shut, locking it, dragging the kitchen table in front of it like that could possibly help. He turned. The radio was on again, but now it wasn't music or voices. It was screaming, children screaming, and underneath that, something worse, a wet, slithering sound, like flesh dragged across bark. Then the attic door slammed open upstairs. Slow footsteps began descending the stairs. One step, pause, another. Each creak of the wood was deliberate, measured, as though the thing descending wasn't walking. It was savoring. Julian picked up the iron poker from the fireplace. His breath came in shallow gasps. The lights flickered. He stepped toward the base of the stairs. Raising the poker, a face appeared around the corner. Not Rhea, not human. Something that wore her skin like a costume. The face stretched too long, jaw unhinged, eyes glassy and wide. It opened its mouth, and dozens of black centipedes spilled from it, crawling over its chest, its neck, the wood beneath its feet. It spoke, but not aloud. The words pulsed inside Julian's skull. "You buried me hungry." Then it lunged. Julian swung the poker with every ounce of strength he had. It connected with a sickening crunch. Too wet, too soft. And the creature reeled backward, its neck folding unnaturally as if made of rags. Centipedes burst from the wound in bursts of chittering black. Julian backed away, slipping on the swarm beneath his feet, falling hard against the corner of the hearth. The thing straightened itself with a bone-grinding pop, head tilting the wrong way on its shoulder. Then it smiled. Julian crawled toward the back door, poker dragging behind him, smearing the insects into black streaks on the floor. He grabbed the knob, yanked. It stuck. He yanked again, would warp from the rain, or the cabin itself resisting his escape. The creature descended the last 2 steps, foot by slow foot. Its hands were longer now, fingers unfolding like spider legs. Its mouth opened wider than any human should. The scream that poured from it wasn't a sound. It was a pressure, one that squeezed the air from Julian's lungs and pressed tears from his eyes. He kicked the door. It gave way. Julian tumbled outside into the cold morning air, choking on bile. The forest loomed again, the crooked pines swaying though there was no wind. He didn't stop to look back. Branches tore his skin as he fled, thorns biting his arms, his cheeks. But he kept running. Through the underbrush, past ancient tree trunks warped with time and unnatural heat. His grandfather had told him once, the woods don't keep the same paths when they're hungry. Julian now understood. The trail twisted behind him, folding in on itself, redirecting like a maze with a mind. The light filtered through the canopy in strips, amber, green, blood red. He ran until his legs gave out, fell onto moss slick with slime and half-decayed bones. Breath caught in raw, rasping gulps. He looked up, and there it was again, the crooked pine. But this one was wrong, twisted differently, bark gray instead of black, its limbs reaching downward instead of skyward. Something dangled from its branches, something long. Fabric? No. Skin. Skinned rabbits. Dolls. Pieces of clothing. Rusted toys. And in the center, tied by a strand of hair, hung a mask. A porcelain child's mask. Smiling, Julian retched while burning his throat. His hands trembled as he wiped his mouth. He needed to get out. Needed to find the real path. Julian, a voice called sweetly, "Don't cry." He spun. Rhea stood behind him, eyes stitched shut with thread. Her mouth moved, but the voice didn't come from there. It came from a mask above, lips unmoving, sound leaking from cracks. "You promised," she said. "We were going to stay friends forever." Julian backed away, hands scraping against something hard, a stone, half buried in the earth. He brushed away the dirt, revealing a small cross carved into its face, a grave marker. His stomach dropped, another stone beside it, then another, all around him, shallow depressions. The clearing was a burial ground. Dozens, maybe more, and everyone was marked the same way. Simple, small, hidden. You didn't bury just one. The voice said, louder now, "You buried them all." "No," Julian whispered. "That's not, I didn't." Rhea stepped closer. Her hands were dripping something dark and sticky. It wasn't blood. It was thicker, black like oil. Her stitched eyes wept it. "I showed you where the hollow was," she said. "You said it would be a game." The mask above began to laugh, dry and mechanical, like a wind-up toy winding down. Julian turned and ran again. No direction this time, just away. He stumbled through the forest, feet bleeding, vision swimming. Eventually, he found something, a fence, rotten, slatted, buried in weeds. A boundary. Beyond it, another path, a real one. He climbed over and fell into the dirt on the other side, gasping. And then the air shifted. The screams stopped. No more singing. No more voices. Silence, but not peace. Because when Julian looked up, the crooked pines were gone. In their place stood rows of identical gravestones, blank, save for a deep groove at the top, and one of them was fresh, still unsettled, still open, waiting. Julian crawled toward the open grave as if pulled by a magnet behind his ribs. The soil was dark, freshly turned, edges crumbling as if it had only just been dug, by human hands or something far older. He couldn't say. The stone at its head was clean marble, its surface glistening with dew. He leaned closer, carved into it. Still wet, as if the letters were bleeding, was his name. Julian W. Rourke, 1987, blank. "No," he said aloud. "No, this isn't real." But the grave didn't care. The wind returned, sharp and sudden, slicing through the trees in one violent gust that sent pine needles raining down like razors. The sky above had shifted. No longer early morning, not quite night. The sun blinked out behind a veil of smoke-gray clouds. And then singing, that same lullaby, soft at first, coming from behind him. "Mirror, mirror, Kal-El Sol." Julian turned. Rhea stood at the edge of the clearing. But she wasn't alone. Behind her were others. Children, dozens of them, their faces pale, some skeletal, some distorted by rot, and all of them holding hands like paper cutouts strung across a dark classroom. Their eyes were missing or sewn shut or too wide to be human. Some mouths moved, humming the melody. Others simply gaped, as if trying to scream underwater. "Julian," Rhea whispered, stepping forward. He stood, shaking, backing away. "No," he said again. "I didn't do this. I was just a kid." "You were the first," she said, tilting her head. Her voice was gentle, patient, The others came later. I didn't kill anyone. You led them to the tree. He remembered, vivid now, that summer, the secret games, how they played among the crooked pines, how he showed Rhea the hollow beneath the bent trunk, how she wanted to go deeper, how she disappeared. He'd told his parents she got lost. He'd never gone back, not until now. And now the forest remembered. You made a grave, Rhea said, taking another step. Now it wants you back. The children began walking forward, still hand in hand, still humming. The lullaby became distorted, voices layering in a strange dissonance that vibrated the air. Julian stumbled and fell backward, his heels catching on the lip of the open grave. The soil collapsed beneath him. He fell, hard. The world went dark. He woke in absolute blackness. Dirt above, dirt below. No sky, no wind, just pressure. Something was breathing near him. He tried to sit up but couldn't. His limbs were bound, not with rope, with roots. They wrapped around his wrists, his ankles, his neck, pulled him into the earth. A whisper trickled through the soil like rain. You left me to rot. Julian thrashed, screaming, but the earth swallowed the sound. The roots tightened, pulling one arm upward, stretching the socket. He felt something give. The pain was blinding, and still the roots pulled. Then movement above him. The sky opened. Not sky, wood. A wooden lid, creaking. The coffin. He was in a coffin. He screamed again, raw now, throat tearing. A face appeared above him. Rhea. She leaned over the open lid, eyes wide and black, strings of hair falling into the hole like roots of their own. Your turn, she said softly, and then she smiled and slammed the lid shut. Everything went dark. Julian's eyes opened to light. He was lying on the cabin floor. The morning sun poured through the cracked blinds in amber slats. Dust drifted lazily in the beams. The radio was silent. The house was quiet. For a moment, it seemed like none of it had happened. Had it been a dream? He sat up slowly, hand brushing his face. Dirt clung to his skin. His fingernails were packed with black soil. His wrist ached, badly, dislocated, maybe broken. He looked at the front door. It was closed again. No sign of footsteps. No handprint. He stumbled to the bathroom and splashed water on his face. Looked in the mirror and froze. Because over his heart, carved into the skin with something jagged and cruel, were the words, I remember. And behind him, in the fog of the mirror, a child's face was watching. Julian whirled around, heart hammering like a caged animal. The bathroom was empty. No child, no shadow, no hint of the ghostly figure in the mirror. Only the faint scent of pine and something else, coppery and metallic, lingering in the stale air. He leaned heavily against the sink, hands shaking as he tried to steady his breath. The carving on his chest throbbed with a dull heat, as if it had a life of its own beneath his skin. He reached up tentatively, fingertips brushing the raw edges of the letters, and winced. I remember, he whispered, voice barely audible. He had to get out, get away from this cabin, from the crooked pines, from whatever cursed history tethered him to this place. But the house no longer felt like a refuge. It was a trap, a vessel holding memories he tried to bury alongside Rhea and the others. Julian forced himself to the door. He gripped the knob, expecting it to be locked again, but it turned smoothly. He stepped outside. The morning had changed. Fog hugged the ground in thick, rolling waves, muffling the world in gray silence. The crooked pines still loomed, their twisted limbs reaching toward the sky like desperate fingers clawing for release. He started walking. The gravel crunched beneath his boots as he made his way down the driveway and into the forest's edge. The air grew colder with every step, the fog thickening until the trees seemed to vanish, swallowed whole by the mist. A low hum drifted through the air. The lullaby again. Julian's skin prickled. He paused, straining to see through the fog. Figures emerged. Children, moving slowly, their forms shimmering like mirages. They wore tattered clothes, faces pale and haunting. Their eyes, empty black voids, were fixed on him. They reached out with hands that were cold and brittle, fingers like twisted branches. Rhea led them, her stitched-shut eyes focusing on Julian as she whispered, "You promise." His heart shattered. "I didn't mean for any of this," he said, voice breaking. "I was just a kid. I didn't know." She smiled, a terrible, sweet thing that twisted the air around her. "You should have known." The children closed in, their whispers weaving together in a dark chorus that echoed in Julian's mind. "One of us must stay." The fog thickened, swallowing clearing. Julian stumbled backward, hands brushing against cold stone. A circle of graves surrounded him, fresh earth piled high, marked only by the crooked pines bending over each like mourners. His breath caught as he realized the truth. The forest wasn't just haunted, it was alive. It fed on memory, on guilt, on the souls of those who dared to forget. He fell to his knees. "Please," he begged. "I'll stay. I'll stay with you. Just don't take me." Rhea knelt beside him, her cold fingers brushing his cheek. "You can't run from this," she said. "Not anymore." The earth beneath him trembled. Roots burst through the soil, wrapping around his legs, pulling him down. His scream was swallowed by the fog. Later, when the search party arrived, alerted by the absence of phone call, the unattended car, they found the cabin empty. No sign of Julian, no footprints leading away. Only the crooked pines, silent and watchful, and in the dirt at the doorstep, a single small handprint pressed deep into the earth. 5 fingers, delicate and pale, waiting. The search party trudged through the dense fog like ghosts themselves, their boots sinking into the cold earth softened by early morning dew. Sheriff Mitchell led the group, his seasoned eyes narrowing at the grotesque silhouette of the crooked pines. Years on the force hadn't prepared him for the feeling this place gave him, like the forest was alive and watching, waiting to swallow any foolhardy soul who dared cross its threshold. Behind him, 2 deputies scanned the underbrush, rifles lower but ready. The townsfolk, mostly family friends and neighbors, murmured nervously, casting wary glances at the twisted trees. "Find anything yet?" one deputy asked. "Nothing but empty ground and silence," Mitchell replied. His voice was gravelly, edged with frustration. They circled the cabin, noting the open door swinging in the breeze, the disturbed gravel in the driveway, and the absence of any sign of Julian. No tracks, no discarded belongings, only the earth, as if it had swallowed him whole. Near the threshold, Deputy Larson knelt, inspecting the soil carefully. "Sheriff, come look at this." Mitchell crouched beside him. In the dirt, perfectly pressed, was a child's handprint. 5 fingers, small and delicate. The deputies exchanged uneasy looks. "You sure that's fresh?" Larson asked, voice low. "Too fresh," Mitchell muttered, "like it was just made." Behind them, a twig snapped. All heads turned. A figure stood at the edge of the clearing. A girl in a faded dress, her black hair hanging in tangled strands, face pale and expressionless. Sheriff Mitchell's breath caught. "Rhea," he whispered. The girl's eyes were hollow, stitched shut with rough black thread. Slowly, she lifted a hand, clean, too clean, 5 fingers extended in a silent beckon. The deputies raised their rifles. Before they could react, the fog thickened suddenly, swirling like smoke. A cold wind whipped through the trees, bending the crooked pines toward the searchers as if to shield the clearing from intrusion. The girl took a step forward. Her lips moved, whispering the haunting lullaby. "Mira, Mira, Kal-El-So." The searchers froze. The air grew heavy, suffocating. The ground beneath their feet trembled. One by one, roots erupted from the earth, curling around boots and ankles, binding with unnatural strength. Panic erupted. "Cut me loose," Larson shouted, struggling against the living grip of the forest. Mitchell aimed his pistol at the girl, but the shot was muffled, swallowed by the thickening fog. The girl's stitched eyes seemed to open just a fraction, blackness spilling like ink. "You should never have come here," she said, voice echoing inside their heads. Branches twisted and groaned, the crooked pines bending inward, sealing the clearing. The search party screamed, trapped beneath the tree's grasp, and in the silence that followed, only the wind remained, carrying the faintest echo of a child's lullaby fading into the distance. Days later, the town of Dorvan Hollow tried to move on, but the weight of Julian's disappearance pressed heavily on every whispered conversation and every shadow that stretched too long beneath street lamps. The bar remained quieter than usual, the regulars nursing drinks with the kind of nervous glances that come from knowing something's broken beyond repair. Sheriff Mitchell sat alone at the far end of the bar, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. His eyes were bloodshot, hands trembling just slightly as he stared into the depth of the bottle. Across from him, an old man, Tom Grayson, the town historian, nursed a cup of black coffee, the lines on his face deepening with each exhale. "It's been generations," Tom said quietly, voice cracked with age, "since the crooked pine started twisting like that." Mitchell shook his head. "I thought it was just folklore, some curse to scare kids." Tom's eyes darkened. "It's not folklore, Sheriff. It's a hunger. The forest remembers, and it demands payment." Mitchell stared at his glass. "What payment?" Tom leaned in, voice dropping. "The children. Every few decades, one is taken. Sometimes they run away. Sometimes they don't come back." "The search party," Mitchell said, voice tight. "They never found a trace." Tom nodded slowly. "Because there's no trace to find. The forest consumes them, swallows their souls, keeps them hidden beneath the crooked pines, where time folds and memories rot." Mitchell's grip tightened on his glass. "And Julian?" Tom looked away, eyes glistening. He knew. He tried to make amends. Mitchell's throat tightened. "How?" Tom swallowed. "He offered himself." "Offered himself?" Mitchell repeated, disbelief flickering in his eyes. Tom nodded. "The forest takes one in exchange for peace. It's why the graves are there, why the trees bend, because those children never truly left." A silence fell between them, thick and suffocating. Mitchell stood abruptly, tossing bills on the table. "I need to see that cabin again." Tom watched him go, murmuring to himself, "One of us must stay." Mitchell drove out to the crooked pines as twilight settled. The sky bruised with purple and blood-red streaks. The cabin stood as if waiting, its dark silhouette framed by the twisted trees, leaning inward like mourners at a funeral. He stepped inside. Dust hung in the air, thick and cloying. The radio sat silent. The walls whispered secrets. Mitchell's flashlight beam flicked over the room, catching a single object resting on the floor, a porcelain child's mask, cracked and smeared with something dark. He picked it up. Cold, heavy. The lullaby began again, softly, from the radio. "Mirror, mirror," Kal-El soul. Mitchell's blood ran cold. Behind him, the attic door creaked open. Slow footsteps followed. Mitchell's breath hitched as the footsteps drew nearer, each one echoing with deliberate, almost ceremonial rhythm on the ancient wooden stairs. His heart pounded so fiercely it felt like it might rupture through his ribs. The mask in his hand grew icy cold, as if the weight of every lost child's soul had been pressed into its fragile porcelain. He spun toward the attic doorway. Nothing but shadows. A thick darkness pooled in the doorway, deeper than the rest of the cabin's gloom. "Hello," he called out, voice strained. The only reply was the creaking of the floorboards settling, or something shifting just beyond his sight. He stepped toward the stairs, lifting the mask in front of him like a talisman. Then the voice came, soft, childlike, yet twisted and otherworldly. "Do you remember, Sheriff?" Mitchell froze. "Remember what?" he demanded. The shadows moved, coalescing into a figure, a girl, delicate and pale, eyes stitched shut, the same dress ragged and stained. She stepped forward slowly, a smile that wasn't a smile stretched across her face. "Remember the promise," she whispered. "One of us must stay." Behind her, the other children appeared, their forms flickering between flesh and shadow. They circled him, hands reaching with icy fingers. Mitchell backed up, heart slamming against his chest. He knew the stories, had heard the warnings, but standing here, in this cabin consumed by darkness, he felt the full weight of their truth. The forest demanded its price. "Who?" he asked, voice barely a whisper. The girl pointed at him. "You." A cold hand grasped his shoulder, and the room spun. He was falling through roots and earth, memories and screams, into a void of black soil and whispered names. He landed hard, face pressed against dirt damp with tears. The roots wrapped around his body, pulling tight. The children's voices rose in a lullaby, sweet and terrible. Mira, Mira, Kal-El Sol. Mitchell's last thought before the darkness swallowed him was of the graves, rows upon rows of them, each marked with a crooked pine bent like a silent sentinel, and at the center, a new stone carved. Sheriff E. Mitchell, 19. Years passed. Dorvan Hollow became a ghost town in its own right. The crooked pine swallowed the remnants of civilization like a slow, suffocating tide. The few who remained dared not speak of what happened, or who had disappeared. The forest hunger was a secret too terrible to share, yet too alive to ignore. Sometimes, travelers passing near the old highway would glimpse a figure standing at the edge of the woods, a girl in a faded dress, eyes stitched shut, smiling without lips. They would hear the lullaby on the wind, Mira, Mira, Kal-El Sol, and those who paused to listen too long would vanish without a trace. Inside the heart of the crooked pines, the trees bent tighter, roots twisting like veins around fresh graves. The forest was full now, but never satisfied, because the hunger was eternal, and the promise remained. One of us must stay. The cabin at the edge of the crooked pine still stands, waiting for the next to arrive, waiting for the next to forget, waiting for the next to listen to the lullaby, waiting to keep its promise.